at all these slave masters posing on your dollar.
So I normally don't do videos like this, a face-to-face conversation format, but I thought this would be more conducive. And before I made this video, I finished the script and sent it to somebody I trust in the atheist community because I wanted to make sure I wasn't being harsh or insensitive towards others, and they agreed with the script for the most part. I was recently watching an atheist show about how non-believers navigate grief. For the most part, it was generally insightful. I was participating in the chat, and I heard someone either say on the show or someone ask if prayer was good or if it had some benefit. As a veteran diagnosed with PTSD, I've learned quite a lot about PTSD and emotional trauma. I answered the question from a genuinely empirical stance that yes, prayer does have some good. However, I was met with a lot of hostility before I could even really explain myself. Not only that, one of the speakers on the show replied to my comment with an emotional tirade, strawmanning my position and putting me on the spot where I couldn't even defend myself. It was an incredibly unfair situation, and in instances like this, makes me sympathize with theists who find it incredibly frustrating to hold conversations with many non-believers. The event actually made me think about the atheist community in general, that as a member of and somebody who actively participates in can be dogpiled on by so many. They immediately responded out of emotion, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's the same thing that they accuse believers of doing when they speak about their faith. By me admitting that there were some positive benefits of prayer, it does not discount any of the negative emotional trauma anyone has experienced from that practice. It's not me hand-waving away anyone's emotions, but trying to have a conversation about the different practices that help heal emotional trauma and people deal with grief. The type of reaction I experienced was so detrimental to our movement. It is these types of interactions that pulls me away from the atheist community. The fact that some people could be so toxic towards someone of their own community and not give them the benefit of the doubt is incredibly frustrating and self-defeating. I don't blame them personally, but at the same time, this reaction is an unhealthy way to navigate the emotional trauma of past experiences. And it sure doesn't paint any positive behaviors for others going through the same situation. Personally, I'm quite upset about the interaction because it wasn't warranted and incredibly disrespectful. But I come from a community in which I also understand the reaction, so I don't take it to heart. The veteran community is rife with emotional trauma, and we all have this unwritten rule to not speak about it, to just move on because the mission is more important than the needs of the individual. That anytime dwelling on these issues could put others' lives at risk. So we package those traumas up, place them into a box, and lock them deep within our soul, or whatever you want to call it. It's easier to do that than actually deal with navigating the emotions from that event. But that's the wrong answer. So, can prayer be good or beneficial? The question is pretty loaded, and when it comes to the atheist community, the majority sees prayer as a whole practice. Someone asking a deity to intervene in their lives or the lives of others, either in a positive or negative way. However, I also acknowledge the emotional trauma that many have developed from spiritual abuse and how some events may trigger emotional traumas in certain individuals, such as someone who has experienced spiritual abuse in a Reformed church context that used theological precisionism as a form of bullying, ostracization, and manipulation, and may experience PTSD symptoms by simply hearing people having a theological discussion. 2. Practices of prayer and daily devotions may trigger trauma for someone who experienced abusive tactics from the hand of a pastor they looked up to for guidance and advice on spiritual formation. 3. Hearing a certain worship song or hymn being played may trigger someone who was spiritually abused at a church that frequently played that song during Sunday worship. 4. The way a church leader dresses may remind someone of the way an elder dressed in the church who spread slander and gossip behind their back to make the congregation distrust them and push them out. I am very well aware that even the word prayer may bring to the forefront memories or strong negative emotions that stem from unresolved emotional trauma. But from my dealings with the veteran community and my own demons, avoiding certain topics because of how it makes us feel may not always be the best path. Sure, not everyone may be at a stage or a point in their life where they're ready to deal with that trauma. It takes some time to gain the courage and emotional fortitude to deal and cope with certain events of our past. But these are personal decisions and shouldn't cause anyone to react to another in a harmful way because of that. If we want to speak about how to heal from these events, we must be open and honest with ourselves and to others. We must be able to talk about certain things without giving emotional backlash. That backlash is a protection mechanism. I understand that. It doesn't help one deal with the trauma, but shields the trauma from being explored. It feeds the trauma by protecting it. The anger that was displayed when I said that there are benefits to prayer was a direct deflection to prevent the mind from feeling and navigating the issues brought on by that event. It only prolongs the trauma. It allows it to continue to dictate your mental state and feeds the emotional pain that eventually eats away at your subconscious. I don't want to make an entire video about the scientific benefits of prayer. That's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to address behaviors that are counterintuitive to fostering a healthy community. But I would also like to address the point that I made, that prayer can be beneficial. As stated before, many people see prayer as a singular concept. However, I split it into two distinct actions. The first action is putting emotions and feelings into thoughts and words. The second action is the act of praying to whomever. The second part is not where I think the benefit lies, but it's in the first part. One of the most tried and true ways of dealing with emotional trauma is the ability to understand your feelings and actually feel them. The trauma comes from the brain not being able to process the events that it experienced. The longer you push this process away, the harder it becomes to deal with, and the more trauma you begin to experience down the road. The veteran community is notorious about this. This also leads them to be hostile towards others, especially when they believe the other person didn't experience the same event or something similar. This was probably why I was attacked the way I was during the show. They believed I had never experienced trauma from prayer and therefore I don't deserve to speak about it. Not only is this based on assumptions, it's also an alienating way to treat members in the community. We should always strive to treat each other with respect and our intentions having goodwill. When one talks about the event that led them to their emotional trauma, it helps the brain build connections that ultimately allow it to process emotions better. Our brain needs to feel the emotions that we want to suppress. The longer we repress these emotions, the stronger and more harmful they become to our body. This is why I believe the first part of prayer is beneficial. It requires the individual to put these emotions into thoughts and allows the brain to process the information. Just like when one visits a mental health provider, they ask you to write down your feelings. This process helps the mind understand what it's going through and how to process it. In order to ask for help, one must understand the situation and the emotions that cause them to be in that situation. They have to put feelings and emotions into some kind of coherent thought. This very process begins the healing of emotional trauma and PTSD. To sit there and get angry about me suggesting this is counter to the actual evidence of how we heal as human beings. It throws out valid concepts because one is afraid to talk about a word. Many veterans I know start out like this. They react with anger and tell me I don't know because I wasn't there, that I have no clue what it was like. That anger is actually part of the trauma. Not being understood by others and the feeling of having to go through something alone causes that anger. It's an emotion we must feel and contend with before we can continue the process of healing. Once they get over that, I ask them to explain it to me, to go through the events that happened. But the process of them explaining it to me helps their brain understand the events that is causing the trauma. This is emotionally draining to that person, and I can understand why so many people don't want to do it. But regardless, it's a part of the journey to healing oneself. You will never get past the trauma until you feel it and contend with the emotions gripping with you inside. We need to do better as atheists and in our community. If we want to show others that the atheist community has a way to deal with emotional toll of being a human being, we need to stop attacking each other. It's detrimental not only to the community, but to others that may be trying to deconvert. Teaching people that certain ideas are off limits because it makes you uncomfortable is a double-edged sword. Sure, it protects a lot of your mental well-being, but at the same time, what is the cost? The cost of showing anger and then alienating others? No, that's not the answer and never will be. I will continue to be honest with others. And even if that means people will choose not to follow me. I've seen too much destruction from these behaviors. I've done a lot of that destruction myself, and it's not okay. Once again, I don't hold any ill will to those who defended themselves, but I will call out harmful behaviors when I see it. We can do better as an atheist community, and we must. Thanks guys for listening to that. It's been on my mind since it's happened, and I was trying to think of a way to be positive about it and to turn this into a moment that will hopefully produce some good for the atheist community, because actions like that are not good, and that is not what I want to see in the community I want to be in. And it's not something that we should also be promoting in our communities. You should always treat somebody with goodwill, and you should always treat them that they had good intentions when they said something, especially when they're a part of the same community. That's all I gotta say. Thanks for listening to me. Like, share, subscribe, and catch me on TikTok, Twitter, and of course YouTube. Take it easy, guys.